Welcome back to Chip Chat, More Rock Radio 91.5. Jim Costa, Brad Tunney, special guest Keno Davis joining us now. We were just telling you, how nice is it to not have to worry about all these scenarios now? What seed? You got to win this. You could just move on and have the MAC tournament now.
Well, you know, coaches that say they don't scoreboard watch or figure all those scenarios are probably lying, because I think we knew every possible option going into the last weekend. And fortunately enough, we're not preparing tonight for a Monday game, and we got a little time to rest and recover and prepare for a big weekend in Cleveland.
Well, you are going to be preparing at least for some travel plans next week, Coach. How is everything going to shape up? When are you going to be heading down there, and how many practices are you going to be able to get into the queue at least?
Yeah, that's something that we had discussed. We don't get into the queue pretty much at all because of the men's tournament, the women's tournament, of course, it being an NBA arena. The first time we'll actually get a chance to shoot on that court will be the day of the game. And for a team that Austin Keel is the only person that's been in that gym, you know, it's going to be a first, including for the coaches. So we met today over some different travel plans and scenarios of what we wanted to try to do, how we want to practice and prepare. And so we'll be heading up there Wednesday night. And have a full day in Cleveland on Thursday to try to prepare, let our guys watch the two teams that we might be faced with on Friday, and make sure that we get our practice and scouting report up there in Cleveland.
What do you think of the tournament format? What do you think of this tournament format where you've been on the one end where you've got to play your way in? You would have had to win 5 games in a row in years past. Now you're the double bye. You only have to win 2 games. The way the conference tournament's set up, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think as the conference stands, the MAC right now, it's one of those conferences that's really trending in the right direction. When I was, came to Mount Pleasant 2.5 years ago, it was the 19th or 20th best conference. We're up to the 10th. So when you're the 19th, I think it's the right format to try to give those top couple teams, your team that can represent you best in the NCAA, you want representing you if you're only getting one. Now, if you get to the point where you're getting 2 or 3, that's where I think you want to look at changing. And I think from the coach's perspective, when we meet in our conference meetings, the only thing that we don't like about it is that if you look more years than not, there's going to be a tie for 4th place. And the difference between being in 4th place and 5th place, where you have to play either 5 games or 3 games, is quite a difference. And I know there's some technical areas of trying to get practice time and gym time that you have to face there. But other than that, I think it's unique, and looking forward to it because we're the 1 seed. If I was the 5 seed, I'd hate it right now. So fortunately, we don't have to be in that position.
And you talk about only maybe one opportunity to get some shots up in the queue before the actual game, and that'll be on game day, potentially on Friday. Any concern with, and you guys have struggled at times on the road shooting the 3-ball this year, any concern with getting to the queue and maybe struggling from downtown as you have at times on the road this season?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about us struggling from shooting out outside.
Probably all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
You know, what's going to happen when we don't shoot well. And yet we've found ways to win. We won at Toledo, where we shot very poorly. Even at Western Michigan the other night, couldn't shot worse, and yet we were getting ourselves back into the game. So I think the idea of us going in there and playing loose offensively is going to be really important, that the moment isn't too big for some of our young guys, that they feel like, hey, let's go out and win, but not pressure to shoot those shots. So I think the nice thing is we should be fresh. We should have well-rested legs, and that's so important for shooters this time of year.
Now, Coach, you've touched on a couple of times this year being ahead of schedule here with this program, and you had said a couple of times already that maybe 4 years was the outlook when you got here. It's been 3 years now where you have potential to win the MAC tournament, and we were kind of wondering maybe what are a couple of reasons why it's been ahead of schedule. Why has it been ahead of schedule for you, at least for the year?
I think the big reason was the return of the bulk of the team and those individuals, what they did in the offseason. I thought, I was a little more optimistic when all of a sudden they came back from a 6-7 week break and we were in the summer, and I looked at how much Rayshawn Simmons improved, how much John Simons had worked on his game. Of course, we knew Chris Fowler would be a tireless worker. So I think that was a big thing, as well as some of the young guys coming in that continue to improve. With Duron Scott, with Luke Meyer, I said, okay, they might be able to help us this year. When you recruit them, you never really know as freshmen if they'll be able to step on the court and give you some needed minutes.
maybe to the average fan who says, well, all college basketball programs are probably in there in the summer doing good work and, putting in extra time in the offseason. What about this team gave them that extra leap coming into this year?
Yeah, they're really not. I think as coaches, you're somewhat hampered by the rules of how many hours you're able to allow to work with them. And those of us that go by those rules, you're at 2 hours a week in the summer. That is all that you're allowed for an 8-week period. So 2 hours on the court in the entire week. And so it's those players that are going to come into the gym and not just play pickup basketball or get some shots. It's those guys that are going to put 1,000 shots up, those guys that are going to put extra time in the weight room. Those guys that do that, they beat out the other guys. It doesn't matter where they were recruited and what people thought going into the year. Those guys are going to have an opportunity. And I think as a coach, when you have 2 or 3 of those guys that really have worked over the summer, you're appreciative of that. When you have 4 or 5, you have something special and a chance for a team to make a big jump.
Coach, you're playing a smaller lineup like you did last year, but it almost feels like it's working better when you have Stewart at that 4 and Simons at the 5. Yeah, the freshman bigs are there, but why is the smaller lineup having more success this year than it had in years past?
Well, I think a couple reasons. One is that all of our players in that smaller lineup are a year older,
right.
So they're a year more experienced. They're stronger, more physical, and I think the second reason is because of those bigs. They don't have John Simons doesn't have to necessarily be there for 40 minutes banging on the inside player, that he can get breaks. He can, especially to start the first half, start the second half. He's not expected to go in there and battle as much as he had to last year. So I think the addition of the bigs, but also, I think the chemistry of the team because of that, you're really seeing why it was important for us to stay patient when we had freshmen and last year when we had sophomores, to understand that these guys would only get better and be more and more competitive.
You said a word there, chemistry. And I think people assume, these guys have played together now. This is the 3rd year for that group. But just how valuable is that chemistry? When you have a team that's running and your offense is quick and you need to know where shooters are going to be, how valuable is that chemistry?
Well, it's very valuable. I think just like you alluded to, the execution in your fast break, your play calls. But I think also maybe just as important is the idea of not getting rattled when a team makes a couple shots or they make a tough shot, of being able to just settle down. You need that through stretches. You also need it when the game's on the line. And more times than not, games, you look at the last 4 or 5 minutes of any college basketball game, this time of year, the other team's got a chance down late, and you got to be able to execute in crunch time. And to have been able to go through it and have some guys that have been there before, really does help us this season.
You had talked a lot coming into the season. Rayshawn Simmons was a captain for you guys coming into the year, as well as Chris Fowler, and he was a guy who worked with Chris a lot during the summer. And coming into the season, we expected a lot from Rayshawn. He's kind of been an unsung hero for you guys this year, and you talked about it at the presser after the Toledo game, the privilege, or at least the opportunity, of having 2 guards in your lineup that are in the top 5 in assists in the MAC. What is the improvements that you've seen out of Rayshawn Simmons this year, and what does he mean to your offense?
Yeah, I think, it didn't take me long to figure out that the work he had put in, but also when I would come to work in the morning or leave at night, what coaches do, they walk by the gym because they want to hear the ball bouncing and they want to peek in there to see who's working extra. And I think as a coach, when you see a certain player doing that over and over and over again, you want to not only reward that behavior, but you also want to try to entice other players to follow that lead and understand that if guys work hard, you're going to get more and more looks from the coaching staff. So I think that his focus coming off of last season, was pretty special, and I think that him being able to push as a point guard, even though he's not playing the point guard position. Chris Fowler has the ball in his hands, so for Rayshawn Simmons to be the 3rd in the conference in assists when Chris has the ball in his hands 70% of the time, I think shows what a special player Rayshawn is and the amount of work that he's put in on his game.
You've got those freshman bigs. I think that was a huge point of emphasis before the season. Everybody said, now you've got that size. The block numbers shot up. You have double blocks this year than you had last year. But how have those guys, Duran and Luke, adjusted to a full season of college basketball? Because it's not the same, obviously, playing high school or AAU, and they both had different trajectories a little bit. What have you seen out of those two?
Yeah, I think it's helped both of them that they complement one another, so we can use them at different times, but also that we've had both players, so they weren't expected to come in as a freshman like a John Simons was and play 30 minutes, 32 minutes. Not that John didn't do a great job on that, but I think it will really help a Luke Meyer, a Duran Scott, for being able to get their feet wet, so to speak, and yet be able to continue to come back and feel like each and every game that everything they give us is a bonus, is something added to our team, and not where they're required to have to put up points or have to, take a bigger role than they're ready for as a true freshman.
Well, we've seen earlier on in the year Luke Meyer was playing a little bit more minutes than he is now, and I think both of us love seeing those two guys out on the floor because they have a lot of energy and they're big guys on the floor, which weren't accustomed to seeing in the past couple of years. What has their progression been like throughout the season in terms of on the floor and how you've been using them?
Yeah, I think that they've progressed very nicely. Even though their numbers have gone down, part of the reason of that is that in our non-conference, not only did we come up with a great non-conference record, but we were beating teams handily. We were winning by 20, 30, 40 points, and so we were able, with a Duran Scott, a Luke Meyer, to put them out extended minutes, even though at times it would have been we'd had a better team if we had gone with a smaller lineup. So they've made great strides, and one thing that you can't put a value on is the experience that you get as a freshman to be able to go against Justin Moss, whoever, one of Western Tavy, whoever it might be, and you're going against a guy that's 3-4 years older than you and experienced, and now what it allows you to do, not only get that preparation, but going into the off season, say, okay, this is what I need to do to change my body, this is what I need to do to change my skill set and improve to become a better basketball player.
We want to get to know you a little more. Who are you a fan of? Who are some sports teams that you like? I mean, you're from Pennsylvania. We know you went to Iowa, but who are teams that you follow?
Well, my father was a coach so we moved around quite a bit, so followed a lot of different sports teams. But those early years, my father was coaching at Boston College, so I kind of grew up a Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics, Bruins fan, and I've always kind of kept that. But yet, understand that you just kind of get to see them on TV now. But I like to follow all the sports teams, and I think as a coach, you're always kind of watching how they build teams and how they try to use chemistry and try to do things to be successful. So, but still a Boston fan at heart.
When you talk about having to watch other organizations or teams professionally, we opened the show today with Ndamukong Suh not being re-signed by the Lions. Kind of a smart, fiscally responsible move by the Lions. You agree with that, to not give so much money to one player?
I think fiscally responsible is the right term. That you're probably a better team if you don't overpay for players, and yet maybe not. Whether that creates ticket sales or loss of ticket sales. Sometimes fiscally responsible. You look at the other side of it. I'm sure for organizations, and they all have reasons, for doing what they do. But I think to be able to win, in the NFL or things, that one player that's important usually seems to be the quarterback, versus some of the other skill players. But it'll be interesting to see what they do to replace him.
Well, you talked about your dad and traveling around in the coaching, and I'm sure he's had a huge influence on not only your success now, but the philosophies. And just what was it like growing up having a coach of the year as your father and someone you could learn from?
Yeah, I mean, invaluable. Of course, having a parent that you're close to, both my parents being very influential in my life, but to be able to have somebody that's gone through everything that I went through as an assistant coach, as a head coach, I would talk to my father about, because I knew he had been there. And I wanted to hear what he had done and what situations that maybe whether he did that he thought was the right answer or things that he would have changed had he had another chance to do them. So, we talk on a daily basis, especially during the season, about a lot of things. But of course, basketball is always a hot topic on what we're trying to do here at CMU and continue to move the program forward.
And Jim had let me know that you and your dad talk almost after every game just about the games and maybe some thoughts from him. And you probably had learned so many things from him, so many specific details. But what are a couple things that have stuck with you throughout your career that you learned from your dad?
Well, there are just so many things. But I think the most important thing that he gave me, an advice with coaching is to not listen to too many people other than what you really believe, and himself included. That it's good to be able to review the tape and listen to what your assistants or maybe even your dad is saying, but to really make sure that you're going in that same path and don't veer off because you have a tough loss, or a bad loss. You got to make sure that you've got a process that you're going through and you're believing in, and if you stay with it, there's a lot of different ways to win college basketball games or any sport games. But to be able to continue to build, and I think that's what we've done is we've stayed the course the last couple years, and I think it's paid dividends. And now it'll be exciting to see how can we finish this year off, and how can we use it to continue to move the program forward in the future.
People talk about 3MU for you guys because you're making so many threes and shooting so many threes. I just wonder from a basketball philosophy standpoint, it seems like the NBA's gone way more to threes. Have you always been a coach that wants this many threes, or is it more of a product? You've got a lot of good three-point shooters.
Yeah, I think what I would like to do is go to whatever your best player's strengths are. If we had a 7'2" post player that was unstoppable in the post,
that'd be nice.
We would not be shooting many threes, all right, unless he got like quadruple teamed. So I think one thing that the fast breaking, the 3-point shooting, the pressure defense does is it puts people in the seats, which allows you to win. It helps you recruit, which allows you to win. So there's a lot of positives in playing that fast-breaking open system. And I think the thing that people don't realize as much is that just because our student-athletes are at CMU doesn't mean they don't want a professional basketball career. And to be able to play a pro-type style gives a Kyle Randall, gives a Chris Fowler, gives a Luke Meyer, those guys opportunities to play past CMU. And I think that will pay dividends for us as well when our individual players have success, not just whatever job, getting their degree, but also having an opportunity to play basketball. I think could really help us.
Talking to the head coach of the Chippewas, Keno Davis, here joining us in studio. You can see him on our YouTube live feed on youtube.com. And Coach, we had touched on how long was going to take this program to maybe get regrouped while you're here. And you've talked about a lot, your plan coming in, being patient and wanting to make sure you did the right things. What was the initial plan when you got here?
Well, I think the reason that I was hired here was that the philosophy of the administration with Dave Hickey, as well as my philosophy, matched so well. And that the idea was that we were going to build a program based on 4- and 5-year guys, with an exception of some transfers that would fill into equal out classes, or if you needed something at a position type, but that we're going to bring quality student athletes in. And I think that to be able to stay with that, even when you're not winning, was something that our coaching staff really believed in. But I appreciate the administration, even before they saw the wins come out on the scoreboard, that they were talking to us about, hey, we see it, we know it's coming. Just stay with what you're doing. And I think our fans, those fans that had been here the last couple of years, could see a product really improving on the court. And so it was nice to have everything come together this year. But I think even more important is you look at the future, not just next year where we'll have a bunch of seniors, but I think that for the foreseeable future, we're going to be one of those programs that can go into the season each and every year feeling like we've got a chance to make the NCAA tournament, and a realistic one at that.
So here you got some time, obviously really valuable that administration was patient. Can you kind of compare that? At Drake, you were there a few years as an assistant before taking the head coaching job, and maybe compare and contrast that with Providence, where you go up to Big East basketball and maybe there isn't that time right away. You've had the opportunity now to kind of mold and sculpt this team.
Yeah, well, I think I was fortunate here, something that was kind of beyond my control, that when I got here, people talked about the cupboard being bare. Well, it was bare because we only had 3 players returning that were on scholarship, and I had to talk Zach Saylor into coming back for a 4th, and those guys would all be reserves for us, and good, solid players at that, but that we didn't have to go through a process of waiting a year to be able to recruit. When I went to Providence College, we were picked 10th that year, but we had 7 seniors. So we didn't have any scholarships. So after year 1, we really were starting over. And whether we would have been able to win at a high level, I don't know. But here, year 1 was year 1. We had a chance to bring in players, even though that they might have been overlooked or maybe didn't have quite as much talent coming out of high school as the guys that you would expect to bring in. They at heart, they really wanted to be at CMU, and we were able to start fresh. And I think that gave us the opportunity in year 3 to show progress, which is so important. It's not so important that you win championships in year 3, but you got to be able to show to your fan base, your boosters, your administration, that the program is headed in the same direction that they expected to when they hired you.
Well, you definitely have this program moving in the right direction. Here's the 1 seed in the MAC tournament. The fan support has been a big thing with you and engaging the community. I know I get your emails during the week. Show up to the games. Make sure you're there in the student sections, maroon and gold sections. How important is it, or how much outside of basketball does your job incorporate? Is it 50% basketball? How much is it that community engagement?
Well, I think different jobs, if I were a coach at different schools, it would be a different number.
Right.
I think when we came in here, I was probably spending more than half the time working on marketing, fundraising, community development, all of those type of things, versus just being able to coach your team and recruit. Now that we have at a certain level, I feel like I could spend more time with recruiting, more time with our player development, but we wouldn't have been able to be successful without our students being able to be out there in full force, without the community being felt like they were a part of the program, that we had to get them back. And even if we didn't get them back on day 1, I think people could see gradually we were getting more and more people to games and more excitement even before our product on the court took off. And so we will continue in the off season of coming up with creative new ways to make it an event to come to McGurk Arena and be able to also reach out to the great alumni of CMU in Michigan and around the country to make sure those that have felt like they've kind of lost contact with the program to bring them back into the fold, because it could be exciting for the foreseeable future.
Well, you have the example, obviously, the 5,000 people for Western Michigan, those Saturdays with the 4,000 plus. I think even the Eastern Michigan game, where some were saying there were more Chippewa fans than Eagle fans. You guys have done some different things. You had those 4:30 games, the doubleheaders with the women, trying new things. What are some different things? Maybe you can't reveal everything, but certain things that you guys are looking at to try to mix it up.
Well, I mean, I think we're trying everything. We're going to try everything. And one thing that our staff will be good about, as well as the administration here, is we'll kind of come in and we'll just brainstorm different ideas. And one of the things this year, as you mentioned, was the different times. We said, well, let's try everything. Let's try noon games, 4:30 games, 6:30 games. Let's see when we get the best crowd. And then the next year we'll adapt to that. The same thing this year, I think we'll look at what can you do to make it an event? What does minor league baseball do? What does, different levels, NBA arenas with the music, with the video board, with what can we try next year that will be exciting so that when people come in next season, they're going to be excited about the product. And we have to have a great product on the court, but also what makes it a more enjoyable experience for them so that they can come out not just once or twice, but that they come out 15 to 20 times to McGurk and know that they're going to definitely get their money's worth when they come.
We're talking about building a team, and I was just talking to someone the other day, and I'm thinking, how do you find Braylon Rayson in Dallas, Texas? How do you find Rayshawn Simmons Community College in Missouri, or even like a Josh Kaczynski? These guys that aren't highly recruited, yet you've put them all together and they all fit somehow. I'm just kind of baffled a little bit as how you're able to get all these guys that aren't right around the corner from you.
Well, before you win and before you've had success at your program, you have to work. And I've got an assistant coaching group that hits the road like crazy and does everything that they can. And you have to find those players that aren't being recruited, that don't have the offers. I mean, we haven't beat out many schools in recruiting. We've gotten the guys that CMU's been their offer. Now maybe we can recruit some different higher level guys or guys that we can beat schools out on. But I think what you're doing is you're looking for the intangibles. You're looking for the young man that wants to be there. You're looking for the guy that's in the gym. You're also looking for the guy on the court that fits your program. So Josh Kaczynski is a great shooter. Braylon Rayson, who's undersized but fits exactly what we want to do. And then Luke Meyer and Deron Scott, who people didn't know about. People didn't recruit them. They didn't want them. But yet we felt like they could be great players. So if you don't have a staff that gets out and sees these guys and evaluates them as much as possible, you can't turn the corner like we've been able to do.
You think everybody's looking around saying, how did we miss out on Chris Fowler? I mean, here's a guy that goes down to IMG Academy out of high school. Didn't even go right to that college right away. Here you guys come up and scoop him up. How does nobody find that guy? I mean, we talked about the character, what he brings, the work ethic. Obviously, he's a great player. I mean, that's a great steal.
It is. I think it also shows that, when we came in there after the Final Four in April and we're able to not just get a Chris Fowler, but fill a whole team of guys that didn't have offers, right. That there are players out there. There's a lot of good basketball around the country, a lot of great basketball in the state of Michigan. And so to be able to find him, a Rayshawn Simmons was somebody during that same time period that I went down. You imagine you get hired and you're going into gyms for an hour at a time, putting tens of thousands of miles on a car in a day, even figure that one out, and see Rayshawn Simmons and say, no, he's not ready, and turn him down. And he goes to Moberly Junior College, even though he was a great academic student, goes there for a year, still has no offers after the year, and we continue to watch him and evaluate him and put our time in and say, hey, he can be really good for us, and make that commitment. So I think one thing is to make sure that those kids that you're recruiting, that you're doing your due diligence, but you got to be in the gym, you got to see them, because the day that they might do something special that you see, there might not be anybody else to see it. And I think a Chris Fowler, Rayshawn Simmons, those guys, credit our staff for working hard and being able to see something that other people didn't.